सर्वेभ्यः नमस्काराः। IIT मद्रास् संस्थायाः संस्कृतसमितेः आश्रये प्रवर्तमानानि मुद्राराक्षसम् अधिकृत्य प्रवचनानि अधुना अनुवर्तन्ते. We have completed the three acts of Mudrarakshasa. We are now stepping into the fourth act. The scene now shifts to the place of Amatya Rakshasa. So we saw in the previous act that the scene was situated in the Chanakya Chandragupta context in the Suganga Prasada, Suganga Palace, and now it shifts to where Rakshasa is. You can see this alternation in acts, so of the scene and situation. Now the act commences with Karabhaka. He is a person who is closely associated with Amatya Rakshasa. And he has some information to be passed on to Rakshasa. He's come all the way from Pataliputra and he's traveled more than 100 yojanas. A yojana is said to be about 8 miles. So quite a distance he has covered, and he has now come here. And he wants to speak to Amatya Rakshasa and the Tavarika, or the doorkeeper. His name is Bhadramukha. So he asks him whether he can go and see Amatya because he has something to convey to him. And the Tavarika, Bhadramukha, says, cautions him that Amatya Rakshasa is suffering from headache. So, and that is on account of his anxiety and worry regarding the tasks ahead. And all night he has been awake, and therefore he has still not gotten up. And therefore, please wait, he says. So I'll just find out when he can talk to you. And we see now Rakshasa. So another portion of the stage is now open. The screen is removed there, and we see Rakshasa there along with Shakatadasa. And the Rakshasa is speaking to himself, Swagata, and he is now brooding over the context that he is facing. Firstly, fate has not been cooperative with him. Vidhehe avidheyatam. So vidhi is not vidheya for him, and therefore it's going counter to all his plans. So his plans are failing. And then he also reflects upon the ability of Chanakya. His Kutila Mati is once again emphasized here also. So Kutilam Kautilyasya Matim, the Mati of Kautilya, which is Kutila. So when I reflect upon that also, so that way I am not able to get good sleep, he says. So Unidrasya Prayati Anisham Nisha, my nights are passing without my getting proper sleep. So because I'm so thoroughly frustrated. Nikamam upagra is frustration. So I'm so frustrated. And then he also says how he is going, he's undergoing difficulty, and he compares himself to the dramatist who is writing an excellent play. what plans he wants to carry out. He has to spell that out in the beginning, and even though it is rather thin, like a stream at the outset, so tanamapi karyopakshepam adu rachayan, and then it should get expanded, vistara, and then the fruit that is contemplated. So that should be given some indication of, and then uh, a good deal of deliberation or what things are happening and how it has to be carried out should be thought out, and then all his plans and actions should be brought to some sort of conclusion. So I am undergoing the various stages that a dramatist undergoes while writing a play, he says. There is a very beautiful analysis in Sanskrit dramaturgy regarding the 5 stages in any drama, for that matter. So they are called 5 sandhis, the 5 joints. So they are respectively called mukha, pratimukha, garbha, avamarsha, and nirvahana. And these also indicate the 5 avasthas called arambha, yatna, praptyasha, niyatapti, phalagama. So in the first stage, some endeavor is indicated, arambha, and then the efforts commensurate with the declared goal or intended goal, that is yatna, and some disturbance or some conflicts are also indicated, but there is some praptyasha in the next stage. So it is not that there is a total giving up of hope. So there is some glimmer of hope. And then the next stage is the attainment of the goal is made more or less certain. It is called niyatapti. And the final one, called the denouement, is phalagama, where the fruit is attained. These are the 5 stages any story, for that matter, passes through. So this has been very well analyzed in Sanskrit dramaturgy, right? Starting from Bharata's Natya Shastra, and in works like Dasharupaka, Sahitya Darpana, and all these texts, these 5 stages that we encounter in a drama. So these are very well taken note of and analyzed and discussed and exemplified and illustrated. And our Amatya is also facing the same situation of a difficult task being carried out. So he refers to the klesha that he is undergoing. So comparable to Karta Natakanam, the dramatist who writes his plays. And he says, Tadapi nama duratma chanakya butuhu atisandhatum shakyaha syat. He proceeds to say, could it be that that wicked Chanakya be defeated by us, be outwitted by us? But somehow, as fate wills it, there is a break in in his thought or in his expression. So even while he is saying Duratma Chanakya Butuhu, so barely has he completed this word, has come to this word, then the Dawarika, that is the doorkeeper, Mr. Bhadramukha, he enters and he says, he wants to say Jayatu Amatyaha, and he wants to indicate that Karabaka is waiting there at the door and he wants to meet him. So he is seeking an interview. And the first words he says is Jayatu. Now, for Chanakya, for Rakshasa, this is something ominous, because barely had he made a reference to Chanakya, Duratma Chanakya Butuhu, has this person Bhadramukha said Jayatu. So victory. So it means victory to Chanakya. And Rakshasa is saying, he's completing his sentence, Atisandhatum Shakyaha Syat. Could he be defeated by me? And then Vidavarika says Amatyaha. So he wanted to say Jayatu Amatyaha, but the placing of the words has come in such a way as to indicate a veritable defeat for Amatya Rakshasa. And therefore, Atsandhatum Shakyaha would now apply to Amatya. So, what Rakshasa was contemplating was, would Chanakya be outwitted by us? And the utterance of the words, the sequencing has so been designed that it is as though the implication is that Amatya will be outwitted, Rakshasa will be outwitted. So that is the idea. So this is called Pataka Sthana in Sanskrit. This is a beautiful technique. So, for example, in Bhasa's play, Abhishek Nataka, Ravana brings the Maya Shiras of Rama and Lakshmana to Sita, and he wants to tell her that Rama and Lakshmana have now been killed, and who is there to protect you? He asks that question. Kenatvam Rakshase. And just then there is a sudden entry of a reporter from the battlefield who says, Ramena, Ramena. So Ravana becomes very angry with this fellow because by whom are you going to be protected is the question. And it is as though he is supplying an answer, Ramena, so by Rama. And Sita blesses him, Chiranjeeva. So now the fellow who has come and made this sudden entry does not know the context in which Ravana is asking some question, and without knowing, unknowingly, he has supplied an answer to the question, and therefore the answer to Ravana's question, so by whom are you going to be protected, is answered by this person from the battlefield who says by Rama. So, and for Sita, the implication is that she is going to be protected by Rama, and very soon it is found out that they are only Maya Shiras and it is not really the Shiras of Rama and Lakshmana. And therefore, it's obvious that Rama is still alive and therefore that Rama will come and protect her and so on. So these are what are called Pataka Sthana in Sanskrit. So there is no exact equivalent for that in English because such a technique has not been regularly or consciously employed by dramatists in the West, or has been analyzed by dramatists in the West. And it can be roughly translated as unintentional dramatic reply. And therefore, this kind of technique has been employed twice here in our context. And therefore, when Rakshasa is saying, Apinama Duratma Chanakya Batuhu, so Davarika says Jayatu. So it means Chanakya Batuhu Jayatu. So this brand Chanakya, so may he be victorious. And then Rakshasa is saying, Atisandhatum Shikyasyat, could he be overpowered by my intellect? So just then Davarika says Amatyaha. So that is to say, Rakshasa is going to be outwitted. So both ways, it is something negative for Amatya. And right then, there is yet another indication. So the throbbing of the left eye of Rakshasa, Vamakshi Spandanam Suchayitva Atmagatam. So the throbbing of the left eye is a bad omen for men and a good omen for women, whereas the throbbing of the right eye is a good omen for men and a bad omen for women. In the play Abhigyan Shakuntalam, when Shakuntala is about to see Dushyanta in his court in the fifth act, she says that her right eye is throbbing, and that is indicative of an ominous situation that was impending. And even so here, Rakshasa is worried that it is as though the Vagdevata is indicating, even through words, that ultimately it will be Chanakya who is going to be victorious, and that he himself is going to be outwitted by Chanakya. So he says, Duratma Chanakya Batuhu Jayatu Patisandhatum Shakyaha Syad Amatyaha Iti Vagishwari. So in addition to confirm that interpretation, she is also making the left eye throb. Vamakshi Spandanena Prastaveta prastavagata pratipadeti, yet I'm not going to abandon my efforts. So even when a person is more or less clear that somehow his enterprise is not going to be a great success, so he must still not abandon his efforts. And Amatya is a person who would doggedly pursue things to their goal, and therefore he would continue his endeavor. So, and then the Varika indicates that Karabhaka is waiting for him outside, and Rakshasa says, "Okay, usher him in quickly." So, we can see that actually Rakshasa has forgotten who this Karabhaka is, and even when Karabhaka enters, so and he comes and sits down on the earth, and Rakshasa is not able to figure out who this fellow is, on what exact errand he had sent him, and for what exact purpose he had sent him, that he has now somewhat forgotten. That way, this is something that speaks negatively about a minister who must be all the time alert and careful, and know very clearly, especially his own spies. So this is an important person, and it is very bad of Amatya that he has forgotten about an important person for whom he had given him important assignment, and who has come back with the report of the assignment. And it is unfortunate on the part of Chanakya to have forgotten. And yes, it is unfortunate on his part, and that is, though that is this speaks of a negative quality of an important person like the minister. We can explain it away by saying that he is indeed worried now, and it is because of this worry and headache and sleeplessness, so that sometimes such things happen. We saw that even at the end of the third act, even Chandragupta has got headache on account of his feigned quarrel with Chanakya. And in this act, right at the beginning, Rakshasa is having a headache, and that is primarily because he is full of very stupendous tasks ahead, and he is very much worried. And at every step, fate is showing that it is going counter to him, and so on. And therefore, he is having sleepless nights, and therefore, he is definitely stressed and distressed, and that could be one reason. So the pressure of um, the stress of worry and so on, and he has deployed so many spies on so many errands and tasks, and he is not able to keep track, primarily on account of this overbearing worry. And then, while he is recollecting who this Karabhaka is, the dramatist makes use of this situation for introducing another situation here. So there enters a Purusha, and then there enters this Malayaketu along with Bhagurayana and Likanchuki. So Malayaketu wants to meet Amatya Rakshasa, so his own minister, and he comes to hear that Amatya Rakshasa is suffering from headache, and therefore he wants to give a surprise visit to Amatya, which he thinks will please him, and therefore he has come along with his new confidant, that is Bhagurayana. So they are all going to come now, and the Purusha, he says Malayaketu is arriving here because Amatya is suffering from headache, and then these three people make their entry. This Bhagurayana, the Kanchukiya, and Malayaketu, the prince. And Malayaketu is heaving a sigh of sorrow. He says, now it is 10 months since his father was murdered, and he has to offer Nivapanjali, the Tarpana, to his father, but he has taken a vow that he will do it only after he achieves another task. And what is that other task? So he recollects the fate of his own mothers. So um, how they all suffered, how when his father Parvataka died, they beat their chest, and then their bracelets were broken, their upper garment slipped, and they were crying in very piteous ways. And even as they fell down and rolled on the earth, the dust, um, it muddied their their brows and so on, the forelocks and so on. So and how they were crying, ha ha, and so on. And he says, I recollect all this, and I want the same fate to overcome the uh, people of the opposite camp. And therefore, in my Shatrustrishu Tata Maya Vidhaya, it's only afterwards that I am going to offer Tarapana to my father. So I must ensure that they also cry in a similar manner. So he wants to give a crushing defeat to Chandragupta and all his allies, and all those heroes should die, and all their wives should become widows and cry like this. So it helps a man with his own mother's died. So that is the idea that he has. He says, I am not a kapurusha, I am not a coward. I have two goals in front of me. Either I must die myself in the battle, or I must ensure that all those wives of the enemies, so they shed torrents of tears. So this is my intention, he says. And then addressing his Kanchikiya, he says, Mr. Jajali, I wanted to visit Amatya Rakshasa, and I wanted to make this sort of a surprise visit, Atarkita Gamana, and because uh, it is that would make him happy, because when somebody is not well, so when you take an appointment and go, it kills the charm by half, and therefore when a person is ill, if you make a sudden visit and an unexpected visit can make the person uh, happy. And for I want to go and meet uh, Amatya Rakshasa. So send back all the kings who had come along with me. So Kanchikya makes that announcement to the kings. So Parikramya, Akashi, so persons who are at a distance, so not visible on the stage. So they are addressed by this Akasha Bhashita technique. So he looks at the sky, and it's as though he's addressing persons at a distance, and he's giving them an instruction to return. So there is a beautiful description of how the kings are returning, how the horses and the elephant that they had brought, so their movements, etc. So and how all the kings who are allies of Malayaketu, they are very obedient to Malayaketu, and as soon as he has given this command, they have all now started returning. And then Malaiketu says, I want only Bhagurayana with me, all others should go. And so even the Kanchikiya, so he also goes out. And there is a conversation between Malaiketu and Bhagurayana just before they actually visit Rakshasa. So Malaiketu speaks to Bhagurayana, and he says, I have one puzzling question. So Bhadra Bhatta and others who came to me, so we heard of these 8 people who ran away from Pataliputra, and regarding whom Chandragupta was very angry regarding Chanakya for allowing all those 8 people to escape, because they were all important persons and they should not have been allowed to escape from Pataliputra and so on. This Bhadra Bhatta in particular, he was the head of the elephants. So in those days, the cavalry and the elephant force were the most important in any warfare, and especially the elephants. So they were considered as supremely important. And therefore, Malaiketu is mentioning only one name, namely of Bhadra Bhatta, and he's not mentioning any other name. He just says Bhadra Bhatta and others. So the most important person is Bhadra Bhatta. So they all came over to the side of Malayaketu, and they made one statement which has appeared somewhat puzzling to Malayaketu. He says, Bhagurayana, can you solve this puzzle? Why is it that Bhadrabhata and others told me like this? So what did they tell? We have not come to you via Rakshasa. So it's not through Amatya Rakshasa that we have approached you, but on the other hand, through Shikharasena, the commander in chief. So we are angry with Chandragupta, who is now has now fallen foul with Chanakya also, and we want to come and be on your side. So that's what they told me. And I have reflected upon this for a long time, and I'm not able to figure out why is it they told like this. Bhagwan says, this is very elementary, sir. So, see, there is nothing wonderful in somebody coming to a person who is a Vijigishu, who is very ambitious and who wants to accomplish great things, and then who is Atma Guna Sampanna, endowed with sound qualities of high integrity and qualities of the heart, and so on, and who is Ashaniya, worthy of being resorted to. But they would like to approach him through somebody who is Priya as well as Hita to the person that they are approaching. They want to approach Mareki, and they have approached you through this Shikharasena, who is Priya and Hita to you, who is dear to you and who is also a well-wisher and so on. And Mareki says, is it not the case that Rakshasa is to me Priyatama and Hitatama? So isn't he near and dear to my heart and the most trusted person for me? And was it not natural for them to approach me through Amatya Rakshasa rather than through this commander-in-chief Shikhar Sena, who certainly is not as close to me as my minister Amatya Rakshasa? And then Bhagarayana says, well, sir, you have not perceived one subtle thing here. You can see that Bhagarayana is on the side of Chanakya. So he is a spy of Chanakya, and he has saved the life of Malayaketu, and he has now come along with him, and he has become the most trusted person that Malayaketu can have, and he is giving some advice, and we can see the capacity of Chanakya to sow seeds of dissension in the Rakshasa camp, in the Malayaketu camp, and this person is achieving that very well. And he says, you have not noticed one subtle issue here, namely that Amatya Rakshasa is having enmity with Chanakya and not with Chandragupta. You can see that Amatya Rakshasa is inimical to Chanakya and not to Chandragupta. And now he is trying to do this as not merely a sort of a rivalry between two ministers, the minister here and the minister there in the opposite camp. It's not that kind of rivalry. He says there is something deeper here. And that is, the Chanakya, as he has accomplished everything for the sake of Chandragupta, will naturally be arrogant and haughty. So he will think that it is he who has gotten everything for Chandragupta. And therefore, he will also be an impatient man. And undoubtedly, at some point of time, there will be a rift between Chandragupta and Chanakya on this account. And it's not impossible that Chandragupta may rid Chanakya of his office, so remove him from office. And then what will happen? So then Amatya Rakshasa would actually be very happy with Chandragupta, because ultimately, all said, Chandragupta is a descendant of the Nandas, and it is to the Nandas that this Amatya was a minister. And therefore, Nandanvayaha eva ayam. This Chandragupta is a person who is a descendant of the Nandas. And therefore, in a way, he is friendly to me. And And then the other point is, from the side of Chandragupta also, what he would think of Amatya Rakshasa is that Amatya Rakshasa has, after all, been the minister right from his, right from the days of Nanda, from his father's days. And therefore, uh, Chandragupta would be ready to make some conciliation with Amatya Rakshasa. And therefore, there is a possibility that from both sides, Amatya Rakshasa and Chandragupta, they would be more than willing to develop a new friendship. So once Chanakya is away, so their whole plan is to ensure that, you see, Chandragupta would be naturally angry with Chanakya because Chanakya can be high-handed, and it is he who has made all the achievement for Chandragupta, and therefore if he keeps on owning all successes to himself, Chandragupta would naturally be poked and irritated, and at some point there will be a breakdown, and um, Chandragupta would naturally be upset with Chanakya, and therefore he begins to distance himself from Chanakya. And actually, Amatya Rakshasa would also be waiting for the same. Once Chanakya is away from Chandragupta, he can get close to Chandragupta, and these two can form an alliance, because ultimately Chandragupta hails from the Nanda family, which Amatya Rakshasa was very famous for serving very loyally. And as regards Amatya Rakshasa, he is himself to be revered as a seasoned master who has been serving the Nandas for so very long a time, and therefore Chandragupta would also be very happy with that. Now, Malaiketu is not able to see through these words of Bhagurayana, and he simply takes him for his word. So, it makes sense, he thinks, and then the two are ushered into the presence of the Rakshasa. And just then, so Rakshasa says, "Oh, yes, yes, I remember now." So, even that he says to himself, so Atmagatam Aye Smritam. So, I remember who this Karabaka is, so who this fellow is. Uh, and then he says, Mr. Karabaka, did you go and meet Mr. Savakalasha in Kusumapura, that is Pataliputra? So Savakalasha is a bard. So he has been employed by Rakshasa to drive a wedge between Chanakya and Chandragupta. And we saw this exactly happen in the last act. And therefore, he is now making an inquiry regarding that. So you can see how well Vishakadatta, the dramatist, has utilized the time required by Amatya to think and remember and recollect and recognize Karabhaka, whom he had sent on some purpose. So he had given him some assignment. So by the time Rakshasa is able to exactly place who this person is, and so all this conversation between Malaiketu and Bhagurayana takes place, and there is not a single sentence in the entire play that could be dispensed with. And therefore, he made use of that occasion to ensure that Bhagurayana sows some seeds of dissension in the mind of Malaiketu without his knowledge, without Malaiketu's knowledge. And therefore, the possibility of a sort of a collusion between Chandragupta and Amatya Rakshasa. So that thought has been planted in the mind of Malaiketu, and we see that this pays rich dividends later when Malaiketu comes to suspect the very integrity of Amatya Rakshasa, and he thinks that Amatya Rakshasa has his own private designs on him, and that rather than the coronation of Malaiketu, he has something else in mind, namely becoming the ally of Chandragupta, probably aspiring to become his minister and so on. So some such thought should begin to work, and therefore he has put this key into his mind. So at first, Malaiketu cannot figure out the significance and importance and implications of this. So he takes him for his word and just accepts. So, and there is this conversation between Rakshasa and Karabhaka, and Malaiketu wants to know what exactly they are conversing. So they have not yet come into the visible presence of Amatya Rakshasa, but they are at a close distance enough as to be able to hear the conversation between Rakshasa and Karabhaka. And Malaiketu says, Bhagurayana, something about Pataliputra is being discussed. So we shall do one thing. We shall not approach Rakshasa right now. So let us listen to what they are speaking. So he wants to overhear and find out. And he says, it does happen sometimes with ministers that in the presence of the king, they speak in one manner, and in the absence of the king, they are with their own um, trusted friends, they speak in a different fashion. So one is Swairalapa, so that is when they speak freely, so with persons whom they can trust, and they speak in greater detail, whereas when they discuss things with the king, they will be strictly formal and there will be a minimum exchange of information and so on. And also, the fear of losing prestige with the king makes them withhold a good deal of information sometimes. And therefore, what they speak in front of a king and what they speak in the company of their own um, close friends can be different. And therefore, wait a minute, we will not go to the presence of Rakshasa right now. Let's just listen to what they are speaking. So, and the Rakshasa, so the Rakshasa and Prabhaka do not know that Malaiketu and Bhagurayana are close by as to overhear the conversation very easily. And Rakshasa is asking, okay, the assignment that I gave you, was it accomplished? So Prabhaka says, yes, sir, with your grace, it was achieved. Now, Malaiketu is eager to know what is the assignment that Rakshasa gave to Skarabhaka. He asks Bhagurayana, what's it? You can see this simultaneous conversation that is going on between Rakshasa and Karabhaka on the one hand, and Malaiketu and Bhagurayana on the other. So every conversation between Rakshasa and Karabhaka. So soon after that, there is a conversation between Malaiketu and Bhagurayana, and there is a sort of a continuous running commentary. So the moment there is a question and an answer, so have come. So this interpretation. So ultimately, Bhagurayana goes on interpreting because Malaiketu himself is new to the to becoming a king. He is still a prince, and therefore he is not able to figure out too many intricacies, whereas Bhagurayana, who is a person who is well trained by Chanakya, he is able to interpret things well and even more competently misinterpret things well and confuse the Malaiketu, and thus that does all havoc. Now, he realized the wit of Chanakya in seeing that without much bloodshed, so, or with the least bloodshed, he is able to accomplish his goal. So, which is a very formidable task, and that such a stupendous task will definitely involve a good deal of bloodshed in the normal course. But it is because of Chanakya's wit that he is able to accomplish everything without shedding much blood at all. So Malaiketu asks Bhagurayana, what does all this mean? What could be the assignment that Rakshasa have given to Karabhaka and so on? And Bhagurayana himself is not able to clearly know what exactly is happening. And then he cautions Malaiketu saying, Kumara, Gahanaha Sachiva Vrittantha. In the things with ministers, it can be something very deep, and therefore it's not something that can be easily discerned. Therefore, let's listen to it a little more, then we can find out. We must note that the word Kumara refers to Malaiketu in this context of the Rakshasa and Malaiketu, whereas the word Kumara meant Chandragupta in the previous act, so while referring to Chandragupta in this context. So the Rakshasa says, okay, please tell me in detail, because it is quite likely that Rakshasa has forgotten very many details of the assignment that is given. So he's asking Karabhaka to report in greater detail. And then he says, sir, you had asked me to go and meet Mr. Stava Kalasha. So Stava is praise and Kalasha is a part of praise. So significant names. So he's a Vaitalika or a bard. So you would only ask me to go and tell Mr. Stavakalasha that whenever there is a possible occasion of some command by Chanakya not being fully followed, implemented by Chandragupta, then you provoke Chandragupta to go against Chanakya, and then that is what has to be achieved in order to drive a wedge between Chanakya and Chandragupta. Rakshasa recognizes that and says, well, carry on. Then Karapaka says, I went and told that Vaithalika, and then there was an occasion there. Now the citizens were all very unhappy after the death of in fact, the death of the entire Nanda Vamsha. So that had been destroyed, and then the people were all longing for some good occasion for celebration. So for a long time there was no such occasion, and the king had announced, Chandragupta had announced Kaumudi Mahotsava. So celebration of the beautiful moonlit night, and people welcomed it all very well. So, and they were all so very happy. And immediately Rakshasa goes back in his nostalgic recollection, and he says, with tears in his eyes, he says, "Oh Nanda, what can be a Kaumudi Mahotsava without you? So you were a source of joy for the entire world, and you were like a moon to the eyes of the people and moon among kings. And without you, so even though there is the moon now, that is to say, Chandragupta is there. So Sati Chandrepi, so it means both. So even though Chandra is there, even though Chandragupta is there. So even if Chandragupta is there, what kind of a Kaumudi Mahotsava can it be? So he sheds tears and says these words. And then, even though this was a matter of great joy for all the citizens, so this wretched Chanakya Hataka, he blocked this. And then it is at that occasion, that point of time, that Stavakalasha that you had employed, so he uttered verses in praise of Chandragupta and provoking him. And Rakshasa wants to know what exactly he said, and Karabaka repeats the two verses that were uttered by the two Vaitalikas, and so the verses that were uttered in the third act, the same are repeated, and Rakshasa is now very happy, and he says, Tavakalasha sadhu, he did a good thing. So he says, the Bheda Bija, the seeds of dissension. So if it is sown at the proper time, it's bound to give its fruits. So Kale Bheda Bijam Uptam Avashyam Phalam Upadarshayati. So, and then he says, when somebody is in a very sportive mood, so you would definitely not like that being disrupted, even if he is just an ordinary person. Prakritopi na marshayet. And when this is the case, would a king tolerate something like this? So, Lokadhikam tejo bhivanaha prithvipatihi kim marshayet. So, would he tolerate that? Naturally, so he would be angry. And Malaikita also says, yes, yes. So he tells to himself, though. And then Rakshasa inquires what further happened. And then Chandragupta was now very angry that his command was thus blocked by Chanakya. And as the context led him naturally to, he praised Rakshasa. Chandragupta praised the merits of Amatya Gunam Prashastya, and Chanakya was ousted from his office. So he lost his adhikara. So now there is a side conversation between Malaiketu and Bhavagarayana. So he says, look, Bhavagarayana, Chandragupta has now shown partiality towards Rakshasa. So that is, he is falling in line with what Bhavagarayana suggested. And then Bhavagarayana wants to add a further nuance there and says, it is not so much the praise of Rakshasa there, as much as it is an expulsion of Chanakya. That was for him more important. So that is to say, he wants even Malaiketu to be thoroughly convinced that the rift between Chanakya and Chandragupta is indeed very strong and very real. So he's slowly conditioning the mind of Malaiketu. And then Rakshasa inquires with a probing eye, probing mind. So now, is this blocking of Kamadi Mahotsava the sole reason for Chandragupta getting so furious with Chanakya as to oust him from office, or are there any additional reasons also? So, and then there is a conversation again between Malaiketu and Bhagarayana, and then Malaiketu says, now what is the point in Rakshasa making an inquiry like this? So, is that not sufficient? And that makes sense as such. So that Chandragupta naturally got angry because what he commanded was annulled by Chanakya, and therefore Chandragupta is angry. What further probing is required here? So he is not able to read between the lines, and Bhagarayana is able to do this. So he says, Amatya is able to figure out that there must be a Pushkala Karana for a rift between Chanakya and Chandragupta, and if it is only superficial and merely occasional, then they can once again make friends with each other and excuse each other and so on. But if there is a more fundamental rift, then this rift will be final. So, Atintikaha bhavishyati vishleshaha. So, and then Karabhaka goes on with his narration. He says, well, sir, as you suspected, there are more reasons for Chandragupta getting angry with Chanakya, because both Malaiketu and Amatya Rakshasa escaped from Pataliputra, and this has infuriated Chandragupta very much so against Chanakya. And Rakshasa is very happy and tells Shakatadasa, who is close by, okay, now that there is a rift between Chanakya and Chandragupta, well, it's as though Chandragupta is easily within my reach. So, may hastatalagato bhavishya, he will be on my palm, and I can easily now dream of releasing Chandanadasa from jail, and then release of his wife and kids also. Then Malaiketu asked Bhagarayana, what is it that Rakshasa means that Chandragupta will now be on the palm of his hand, his own hand? And then Bhagarayana further conditions him. He says that else than getting rid of this Chanakya, the apakrishtasya Chandraguptasya uddharanat nakachit karyam avashyam bhavishyati. So once Chanakya is away, he thinks that there is nothing more to be accomplished. So everything is easy. And then Rakshasa goes on with this conversation with Karabhaka. And then what is that fellow, that Batu Chanakya? So Chanakya is much young compared to Rakshasa, and therefore he inquires about Chanakya as, what is the fate of that Batu now? So his office lost. So where is he now? Karabhaka says he's still staying in Pataliputra. And Rakshasa is a bit puzzled and he's a bit worried and anxious. Well, he didn't go to some tapovana, and or did he take up another vow and say that I will vanquish Chandragupta or some such thing? So Karabhaka says, yes, I hear that he wants to go to the tapovana. And then Rakshasa says, Shakatasa, somehow I don't think he will go to the tapovana. So this doesn't seem to make sense for me, because you remember how during the reign of Nanda, so the insult that was made to Chanakya, that was never tolerated by Chanakya. And so he was seated in a high seat and made to get down from that seat. And that one thing triggered the very great aftermath. And therefore, I don't think that Chanakya is a person who would keep quiet, and I'm sure he will do something against Chandragupta. So how can he merely tolerate and keep himself in Pataliputra, right in the presence of Chandragupta, in the same city? How can Chanakya dwell? He must be a person who, naturally, going by his past record, so he is a person who gets furious with Chandragupta and do something against him too. So, and Malaiketu and Bhagavana, once again, they have a conversation, and then Malaiketu is confused as to what exactly is the point for Rakshasa, as to whether Chanakya goes to some tapovana or takes up some pratigna or whatever. Now, how is it going to matter? Bhagavana says, well, sir, this is elementary. This is nothing to discuss here. Then the point is only this: the moment Chanakya goes permanently away from Chandragupta, then all that this Rakshasa wanted to achieve is accomplished. So then Shakatadasa says, okay, well, Chanakya can be expected to be angry with Chandragupta, and he may have taken another vow to finish him. So the conversation is over with Karabhaka. Also, this is all the information that she had to give. And then Rakshasa says, Shakatadasa, take care of this Karabhaka and see that he is given proper rest and so on. So Shakatadasa and Karabhaka, they go away. So then only Rakshasa remains there. And he says to himself, well, I want to see the prince. And just then, Malaiketu presents himself. So he says, well, I myself came, sir, to come and see you. So in a way, Rakshasa should have suspected that, see, the arrival of Malaiketu right at the moment that he was saying that he wanted to see him, so should have made him suspect that Malaiketu must have been there for a long time, watching them or overhearing them or whatever. So, or at least suspect that, but he does nothing, and he says, I'm surprised. Aye Kumaraha and Idam Asanam. So please sit down here. And then they all sit down, and Malaiketu inquires him how his headache is. And then Rakshasa says, well, sir, till our Kumara, that is yourself, Malaiketu, becomes an Adhiraja, a king lord. So till then, how can my headache go away? That is to say, that has been constantly the thing that is bothering him. So, and then Malaiketu says, okay, once you have taken this task up, so how can that be unaccomplished? Urikritam etat aryena na dushprapam bhavishyati. So it will definitely be accomplished. So he comes straight to the issue. Well, how long should we wait now to attack Chandragupta? So, because we have now collected all the various armies, so the various persons who have gone over to the side of Malaiketu has all been listed in the previous act, so that we saw, and therefore, for how long we have to wait to attack Chandragupta? And then Rakshasa says, why wait? We can start right away. So, Pratishthasva Vijayaya. And then Malaiketu asks, now it is ideal to attack the enemy when he is in some distress. So when he has some problem, it is best to attack him. And then Rakshasa says, well, there is such an occasion now. What is the occasion? He says, Sachivo Vyasanam. Now, Chandragupta is in great problem regarding his own minister. So Chanakya was the main source of strength. He is now going away from Chandragupta, and therefore that is the right moment for us. Malaiketu says, after all, if one minister goes, another minister can come. And therefore, Sachiva Vyasana is no great Vyasana, am I right? And then Rakshasa says, well, what you say is true of most of the kings, but not so in the case of Chandragupta. And Malaiketu says, no, sir. Um, People anyhow are attached to the Nandas, and therefore the situation will be favorable to us, and so on. So Rakshasa says, Maivam, see, the citizens are of two types. One is people who rose in revolt, so along with Chandragupta, and there are those that who are loyal to Nanda, and then for those who rose in revolt along with Chandragupta, the demerits of Chanakya, so they cause disaffection, and not for those who were already loyal to the Nanda family. And then there are people who are angry that Nanda Kula has been destroyed, and therefore um, some people will be there who will follow Chandragupta. And then Malaiketu says, is then this the occasion for Sachiva Vyasana, the right occasion for our attacking Chandragupta, or is there any other reason? And then Akshasa says, Kimanyai Bahubi. We don't have to have very many reasons for some kind of difficult situation for Chandragupta. This itself is the most important one. Nitadhi Pradhanatamam. And then Malaiketu says, how do you say that this is the Pradhanatama? So, aren't there other ministers? So, Anitra Mantrini Atmani Va Samasajya, can't he react to this himself? And then Rakshasa says, well, Chandragupta is indeed incapable, because it is only in the case of kings who are Swayatta Siddhi that this can happen. That is to say, if the minister has fallen foul with the king, then they can manage with others. So, or Ubhayayata Siddhis, that is to say, things are decided by both the king and the minister. In such cases also, the king can manage. But in the case of Chandragupta, he is totally Sachivayata Siddhi, and therefore now he will be in a condition of a person who has lost his eye, Chakshur Vikalaha Iva. And to him, the Loka Vyavahara is apratyaksha now. And therefore, how can he take remedial steps in this context? And therefore, it's not possible for Chandragupta to act all on his own. And he's also like a child that has been weaned away from the breast of the mother. So dependent was he upon Chanakya. And therefore, I don't think that even for a moment he cannot sustain himself. So therefore, this is the best moment. And Malaiketu thinks within himself, so in his own mind, Dishtya na Sachivayata Siddhi asmi. So I, for one, am not Sachivayata Siddhi. It's to say, I can think for myself and I can take my own decisions and so on. So we have almost come to the end of the fourth act, but there are some very nice points to be dwelled in a little detail upon, and therefore we shall stop here for now and continue in the next session. Namaste.
Namaste, sir. Thank you very much for a wonderful lecture on Mudrarakshasa. Thank you very much, sir.